Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
Mike Mooney of Platteville is a Democratic candidate in the 49th Assembly District. Mr. Mooney, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
You say in your campaign website that rural schools in Wisconsin have been devastated. Now, so what would you, as one member of the Assembly, work for to reverse that trend that you see?
Any number of things, really. We've got a voucher program in our state right now that is, in our district, cutting millions of dollars right off the top of what we have available.
So you would work to end the voucher, the choice program?
Pardon?
You would work to end the voucher?
I would. It's you know, from a state issue, I'm looking at this more as for my constituents in the 49th Assembly. We don't have any voucher schools in our district. So when people see and realize that their tax money is going outside of our district for schools that have nothing to do with ours, they find it rather upsetting.
Okay. So you think that especially rural schools are underfunded, so you would work for a dramatic increase in funding for all K-12 schools?
Well, I don't know what you mean by dramatic. I would have to look at certain numbers, and that's spread out over time and over expertise. But I think there's certainly room for funding increases. You know, our current government is finding money for all sorts of other things right now, even though we're told it isn't there. So it's certainly a possibility.
Is there any one example of cut to a public school in the 49th that you can offer as an example of how rural schools have really been crippled by this state aid? And does anything come to mind?
What comes to mind is when I talk to teachers and students actually from the University of Wisconsin program who want to be teachers. One of the most telling things is how potential teachers, people who want to be educators, people who want to go into this field, are kind of being talked out of it right now. There's been an attack not only on funding, but on teachers themselves, and as well as other public folks too. But you kind of see it happening in advance. There's a thing rolling where we're not going to have good teachers like we need. And these local schools are cornerstones of the communities. These are rallying points for local towns, the sports teams. They really do anchor things, and they're good for the economy too. People don't move to towns where the schools are disintegrating.
Have you thought about if you think we need a lot more money for public schools? Have you thought about any changes in our tax structure to come up with more money? Any ideas on where you'd come up with additional state aid for public schools?
Well, if we could reverse the Foxconn thing, that would be a nice help. $4.5 billion to a Taiwanese company when our schools are suffering is a little bit of a disadvantage, and you know, that kind of ties into the Kimberly-Clark thing as well. We're prioritizing big corporations right now at the expense of a lot of public goods, and that's one example.
Is there any justification for state aid to a private company that you see? Any circumstances?
I'm sure there are circumstances. One of the things that I like to say and make note of to put the funding thing in perspective when it comes to Foxconn, $4.5 billion, if we want to stimulate the economy, we could take roughly, in my district alone, roughly 181 startup businesses and give them each $250,000 to get going. And what that would do in my district compared to giving it all to a Taiwanese company just above Chicago would be astounding. And not only would we do it in my district, if we were to do something like that, you could do that in the other 98 assembly districts as well and still stay within that $4.5 billion. So I can imagine help from the state, but certainly not in the way that it's being handled right now.
Okay, you mentioned the UW system. Tuition on resident undergrads has been frozen for 6 years.
Sure.
The governor would like that freeze to continue for a 7th and 8th year. Your position?
I think it makes the governor look really good that he's keeping tuition down. What I think it does is hamstring the university a little bit. I think it's the wrong focus. I think what we need to do is focus a little bit more on overall affordability. You know, if that's an aid for less privileged folk, if that's in a way of the way that we loan students money, those are the things we need to look at.
The idea that local governments have been living with levy limits to control property taxes for 14 or 15 years, some local officials say that really hurts their ability to provide local services. Should we keep levy limits, dial them back, loosen them, or get rid of them?
I'm in favor of local control.
Okay.
When we start losing local, I know the people in my community know our community better than the politicians in Madison. So when we start ordering around how we're gonna fund things and micromanaging it out in like my rural area, they're out of touch. And our county board, our school board, our city councils know a lot more about our area and should be in more control, I think, over those funds than currently is.
The impasse, the gridlock in the Capitol over how we pay for highways, bridges, maintenance, construction, how would you break the impasse? How would you like to see it broken?
It's a funding issue. Right now, we need good roads. We in our district kind of see what's going on in other parts of the state and feel we're being a little bit left out. Right now, I think we're spending 22 cents out of every dollar on transportation funding. That's going to pay down debt that's already there. 8 years ago, I believe that was 10 cents. So we're getting farther and farther in the hole. So that's a conversation that we definitely need to have. What we can't do and what's not sustainable is to keep on borrowing for this.
Are you ready to consider raising the gas tax, the $75 a year you and I pay to register a vehicle, or tolling? Your position on those three?
I've lived in Illinois. No one likes tolling. No one likes tolling here. One of the problems with tolling is so much of the money that comes in goes to that really unnecessary infrastructure. As far as a gas tax, that's certainly something that could be on the table. We've got to look at agricultural aspects to this too. Our farms are growing. I'm in a really big and important agricultural area. Our farm equipment is bigger. It's on the roads more. As farms consolidate, those vehicles are traveling more on our highways and they're tough on them. So what those figures are, I don't know, but I think we do have to put all of those options on the table.
A big issue in the next budget is whether we need a new state prison. 2 of our prisons were built in the 1800s. Some members of your party that ran for governor said we could, if we emphasize rehabilitation, we could cut the number of inmates in half. Do we need a new state prison?
I wouldn't jump on that. I don't think offhand we need a new state prison. I think the idea of figuring out why there are so many people going to prison would be a good first step before spending however much money a new prison would cost. A few weeks ago, I spent an evening with 2 corrections officers in my district, and we had a really good talk about what they felt was important. And what was coming up most for them really had nothing to do with new facilities, but it had to do with funding and the way that they are being worked and overworked. Sometimes these folks work 16-hour shifts, and the way that they are kind of understaffed in a lot of these places right now is the real issue. They'll be sent home. One of the fellows that I was talking to, by the time he got home after a 16-hour shift, he was able to sleep for 4 hours, and then he was back driving to another 16-hour shift. Another issue with this is some of the prisons are so understaffed that it's costing us extra money to get corrections officers to those. If someone is short on a given day, they will kind of import an officer from another area, and they're paying that officer then a per diem to get there, and whatever else is associated with that. So it's a really inefficient way right now. But to go back to the actual facilities, we need to have fewer prisoners. And if that's treatment for drug and alcohol offenders, it's a much better way to do it, in my mind. It lessens recidivism. Let's start there.
Okay. Let's talk. Well, let's continue on that. That's kind of a healthcare issue. How do we preserve and maybe expand healthcare in rural areas like you want to represent?
There are very few, and there's a great need for even just clinics in our rural areas, in some of our smaller towns. The biggest thing that we can do is accept the Medicaid expansion. Not only would that put roughly 10,000 good jobs out there, and this is no expense to us. This would save Wisconsin taxpayers roughly $200 million a year. It would insure another 80,000 people that aren't insured right now. It's, in my mind, almost appalling that there's an answer that's so close, and we've got people in these rural areas who are truly suffering and don't have access to it. So that's a no-brainer in my mind. It seems to be based purely on ideology, and it's a sore point for me to see something, at least as a first step, so simple, and especially while people are in a world of hurt in some areas.
Are you hearing from hospitals and nursing homes and other medical professionals that Wisconsin's Medicaid reimbursement rates are so low that we might be at a tipping point that threatens the health care provided under our Medicaid program?
Yeah, I hear it all the time. And if we were to take that Medicaid expansion money, we would be able to free up a lot of the general fund, and we could use that to increase reimbursement rates. And I think if we raise those reimbursement rates, we would have a much easier time drawing folks out to clinics, and again, putting good paying jobs out in the country where they're needed.
State government in Delta Dental has a pilot program providing dental care to the low income in some regional clinics. Are you aware of that program? Should it remain a priority?
I think anything that allows folks access to any type of health care, be it conventional health care that we think of normally, be it dental, be it mental health, which has come up numerous times. As I walk doors, and I've walked thousands in the past several months, mental health comes up all the time. Anything that we can do to help people get access to health care is going to be a good idea.
As you've met with voters in the district, have they raised any issue involving caregivers? AARP estimates that 578,000 Wisconsin residents are caregivers for a family member or a neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
So would you support laws or rules that require hospitals to recognize and work with family caregivers when someone they love is hospitalized? Has that issue emerged?
It has. Again, I think this goes to freeing up money. There's a lot of these caregivers who are family folks are reimbursed. If we can raise those things, it's going to make it a lot easier on the families, and let people stay in their homes too as well, which I think is important, and especially for some of the elderly folks who really want to hang out at home.
The bills in the Capitol that will legalize both recreational and medical marijuana, your positions on both?
Beginning with the medical marijuana issue, I would always defer to the physicians, and they're smart folks, and if that's what they want to use to help a person with whatever it is they're ailing from, be it pain or other, I think that should be their prerogative. More plays in the playbook. Recreational marijuana, we've seen other states going that route. It's a good income stream. I'm not exactly sure where the folks in my district are on this. I think they're leaning towards approving that. I think they generally would. I know that alcohol and tobacco are far more dangerous drugs, and if we could somehow put it in that kind of context, I'd be open to the discussion for sure.
Then lastly, you're trying to unseat an incumbent. Differences between you and the incumbent you're trying to unseat?
I would say the main difference is the way that we will probably vote when in Madison. I think my approach is different in that it's a little bit more of a ground-up approach. When I mentioned the Foxconn thing and how that money could have been distributed and used differently, that would be what I consider a ground-up approach. Small businesses, small farms, helping those folks in their areas as opposed to just dumping it on one Taiwanese business, I think.
Okay. Mike Mooney of Platteville is a Democratic candidate in the 49th Assembly District. The election is November 6th. Mike, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thanks. I enjoyed it.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.